Hey, I would say, I don't know whether to say good morning or good afternoon. It's 12 noon here on the East Coast. It's Saturday, June 7th, 2025. You're watching DeProgram with John Kiriakou and Ted Rall. I'm Ted Rall. That's John Kiriakou over there.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
Thanks for joining us. It's so good to have you here. And just a reminder, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Rumble, please subscribe, please like, please do all the things, follow, please. Pass around. Otherwise, it just goes away. But
yeah,
we're doing well. So but we want to keep going. So, so please help us out to show your support. So, John, it's the oldest joke in the books. No slow news day, but it's sort of never.
Ted, I got to tell you,
what's going on. Let's just get into it.
Yeah, this Musk Trump thing. I thought when I first heard it, the moment I heard it, I thought, oh, it's a deep fake. Like we're seeing a lot of deep fakes surrounding the Diddy trial, for example. Like I watched this phony video. It was like 20 minutes long about Eddie Murphy's testimony against Diddy and this incredible thing. Well, Eddie Murphy never testified against Diddy. Eddie Murphy doesn't have anything to do with this trial. And then there are similar ones involving Alicia Keys and Dwayne Johnson and a whole bunch of people. So I thought Musk says that Trump's a pedophile and he was on Jeffrey Epstein's island. It's a deep fake.
Wow.
And then it wasn't. So the bottom line here is we're seeing a Washington breakup, the likes of which we haven't seen in a generation or longer. But the question is, what did Elon Musk have to gain by launching a frontal attack?
John, I'm really happy that you asked that question because I totally understand what Donald Trump got out of this relationship, right?
Absolutely.
Donald Trump got 250. Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Donald Trump got $250 million, right, from Elon Musk. Donald Trump got, legitimacy from Elon Musk. He got, the sense of being someone tied into Silicon Valley and the whole tech establishment. But what did Elon Musk get out of it? And what could Elon Musk have gotten out of it? Sure, he has government contracts, but he would have had those contracts anyway. Yeah. And now he's really soiled as being, seen as viciously partisan. I mean, the Democrats will never forgive him or have anything to do with him. And now he's on the outs with Trump world as well. Sure, he's the world's richest man, or at least he's got a claim to that title. But, he's lost a lot from this. I mean, it reminds me, they say that people who, Donald Trump has this reputation that people who climb into bed with him, they come out and it doesn't go well for them. And this seems to be, we could all see this coming, but I guess I didn't expect this to melt down the way it did on social media, where they're basically, you could have a political falling out in the past between, say, I don't know. I'm hard pressed to think of anything like this.
Yeah, right.
Really. But let's just say Henry Kissinger had decided to part ways with Richard Nixon. It's not like they're going to start tweeting at each other. So, no. It's got real world consequences, right? Like Tesla stock took a hit. Overall, that stock was down like 50% at one point. It's mainly made a recovery, but it's a wild roller coaster. It has an effect on the global economy.
It does. Tesla stock was down 14.8% just overnight because of this fight with Trump. Thank you, Eric. And first of all, the Republicans on Capitol Hill are picking sides, and that's not even really a very appropriate way to say it. Every Republican on Capitol Hill has jumped onto Donald Trump's side. So Elon Musk today finds himself alone. Why go into something when you know what's going to happen at the end? Of course, people ask me that all the time, and I say I would do it all again. But what does Elon have to gain? Now, just to double down, yesterday, Elon said that he was going to withdraw from cooperation with the NASA. Unfortunately, the only way to get into space, besides with Elon Musk, is with the Russians. Now, we go into space with Russian rockets. We hit rides with Russian cosmonauts. But it's kind of an odd period right now since we're trying to destroy the Russian government.
There's that.
And so what do? Do we just not have space exploration until we can reconstitute a rocket program? It seems that way.
Well, I mean, this does remind me seriously of when the whole idea of privatization of space came up a few decades ago.
I remember a terrible idea.
Totally. I just thought, what a dumb idea. Not to mention, it's just the most expensive thing human beings know how to do. So really, all these nations should be pooling together. Maybe I watched too much Star Trek, and then all the world's countries got together and formed the United Federation of Nations, and then that became the United Federation of Planets. But I mean, that made sense, right? I mean, Gene Roddenberry knew things. He was right.
Yeah.
It just sort of, I mean, obviously Elon Musk rolled back that threat to strand our astronaut.
Yes.
He was funning. I mean, Elon Musk is not a maniac. He wasn't going to do that. But the whole thing is, I mean, it's just a bad look. And I have to agree that it really does make America look, I heard a commentary say, on BBC, that it makes us look really undignified. And I think that's really right.
It does. And I have to ask too, what does this do to the big, beautiful bill? And the reason I ask it is because the big, beautiful bill has a provision in it, or several provisions in it, to begin a $200 assessment annually on all electric cars. So if you have an electric car and this thing is passed into law in the form that it's in right now, you would have to pay at income tax time $200 every year for the great privilege of owning an electric car, with the idea being that the $200 would go to help support the gas station owners that you're putting out of business. That's insane, but that's the idea. There is also a $100 annual fee. They don't want to call it a tax, but a fee on people who own hybrids for the same reason, because you're taking food out of the mouths of children whose parents own gas stations. And so, as the Italians like to say, what, I shouldn't eat too?
It is an insane provision. I mean, look, broadly speaking, I think it's questionable whether the big, beautiful bill is going to get through the Senate in its present form.
I wanted to ask you that. I wanted to ask you that for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Senate is much tougher than the House normally because the Senate, people are more independent thinkers, and they're not all up for re-election every 2 years. Okay, they're staggered, so it's every 6 years. That's number one. Number two, the bill only passed the House by one single vote. One single vote. So, in the
several of those votes would now be reversed.
That's
because they're people like Marjorie Taylor Greene feel that they were conned.
That's right. So in the Senate, there are senators, Republican senators, who want individual provisions taken out or put in. Whatever happens on the Senate side, this bill has to go back to conference committee where it's reconciled, because the House bill and the Senate bill are going to be slightly different. And so they hammer out the differences.
Or maybe really different this time.
And it could be really different this time, depending on who has a bigger voice in conference committee. Then it goes back to both houses for passage. But if you only passed it in the House by a margin of one, and let's say you pass it in the Senate with a margin that looks like 2 or 3,
if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, is that enough to make this thing law? I'm thinking it's not. And then what do we do? Then there's no budget. Yeah. And we haven't even talked about
and Donald Trump possibly goes into the midterms next year. The Republicans go to the midterms without a significant legislative achievement to point to.
Not a single one.
I think that's something to consider too. The political fallout. I mean, it seems like we're now in an era where presidents only get to have one big bill.
Yeah.
Like Biden had the infrastructure bill, and that was it. Yeah. And that Obama only got the Affordable Care Act, and that was it. It's not to say that they didn't get anything else done, but not much else. And so, I mean, that would be a big handicap. I mean, Trump knew he had to move quickly. That's why he wanted to do this one thing. I get it. I get the thinking. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to say I give this thing a 40-60 chance. It's not like it's dead, but the odds are a bit. It's facing some headwinds, right? I mean, it's like a salmon trying to get it back upstream, and there's some new dams that have been installed along the way. It's going to be, and just parenthetically about the anti-clean fuel subsidies that you're talking, the anti-subsidies that you're talking about. It's such a reversal, right? I mean, back 20 years ago, I bought a hybrid here in New York.
I did too.
It was like it was great. There was a tax break, a federal tax break. I think it was $4,000,
mm-hmm.
and then you could park at any city or municipal parking lot in the city of New York. Not that there are very many of them, but for free. And best of all, you got a sticker on your car that entitled you to drive alone in the high occupancy vehicle lanes, which living on Long Island during rush hour, which is like a parking lot, was a godsend. It turned a 5-hour commute into a 2.5-hour commute. And all those things are, I mean, I don't really care that much about, electric vehicles politically, but they are clearly the future. And how does it make us look? I mean, this is a country like we can't do big things anymore. We can't build high-speed rail. We can't do socialized medicine. We can't solve big problems, and we can't make college affordable, on and on and on. Part of why Trump came into office, he won twice, is because people were sick of that. And this plays into that narrative, in my opinion.
Wow. I can't even add anything to that. I can't make it better. I agree completely. That was the appeal of Donald Trump. He was the one who potentially could really shake things up. And now it's like his hands are tied. Eric makes a comment. We always have money for war. Oh boy, do we have money for war. More money than the Pentagon even asks for. Every single year, Congress appropriates more money than the Pentagon asks them for. And that's inexcusable. I was driving today to meet a friend for breakfast, and going up, a normal road here in Arlington, Virginia. It was like Bosnia during the war, trying to get through this road. But we have plenty of money for missiles and to send to Israel and subsidize their settler housing and all this other stuff. But we can't pave the friggin' road in Arlington, Virginia. It doesn't make any kind of sense. I'm very disappointed. But anyway, getting back to this issue of the passage of the big beautiful bill, I watched an interview day before yesterday with Lisa Murkowski, a second interview, and it was funny. She was walking while she was giving the interview, and she was saying, "Well, it would be great if we could pass this for the budget and blah blah blah," but then she hit on something that has not been at the top of the list of talking points from the administration. The president is asking that the debt ceiling limit be lifted. Mm-hmm. And the answer is, of course it should be lifted. The thing is, it's become this hot potato that's exchanged between the two parties. Whoever happens to be in the White House wants a raise in the debt limit. Whoever happens to be in the opposition party in Congress, they don't want to raise the debt limit or debt ceiling. And that's how you squeeze the other side to get something that you want. But it inhibits a president from his ability to lead. plain and simple. And so it doesn't matter who happens to be in the White House. There should not be a debt ceiling.
I agree, John. Look, I mean, the thing is, I looked into this to see if other countries do this. They don't.
They don't.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
No.
I mean, basically, it's like in all other countries, whatever if the revenues of the federal government are larger than the expenses,
yes,
then there's a budget surplus, and if not, then there's a deficit, and that's it. And you don't have to. The government doesn't have a credit rating because it's its own financial issuer. It just makes debt as needed. It issues debts, sells debts. I mean, so it's this fiction, that we keep hearing. Like Elon Musk is saying this right now. Oh, the government needs to live within its means.
Yeah.
Well, clearly that's not true.
Right.
The government hasn't lived within its means for well over
decades,
100 years, and it's just not really necessary. And it's just sort of like you said, it's just this artificial constraint that comes out of this fiction that it's kind of like a family budget. Everyone has to come in the black, which, by the way, isn't true about family budgets, right? Because people take out home mortgages, they have credit cards, they take out car loans. Like, Americans don't live within their means as families either.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And because government has the ability to print money, it doesn't really need to live within its means, because so long as it can balance the need to spend with the need to keep inflation in check, then, it can do whatever it wants. I remember, you and I talked about this once before. I remember when it was one year when Bill Clinton was president, and there was an article in the Post, just this little tiny article in the Post, saying Congress passed a budget. Like, how did everybody miss this? Congress passed a budget yesterday, and it's the earliest in the legislative year that Congress has passed a budget in more than 100 years. Like, how did that happen? Well, it's because they were doing their jobs. They were doing what they were paid to do. You're paid, like, one of the very few things that Congress is mandated to do is to pass a budget, to appropriate and authorize money for the working of the federal government. And they actually did it on time, and it took the whole country by surprise. Ridiculous.
Right. Well, I mean, you do have to give Clinton credit for that. That's also in part because he rolled over to the Republicans.
Yes, he did,
and gave them everything they wanted. So
that's right.
They were like, okay. They didn't have anything to disagree about. They kind of violated a lot of the rules of Keynesian economics, right? Which is, during the, run a deficit, like save money during a, run a surplus, save the money during your during the big boom times, which Bill Clinton had, and then that money will be available to George W. Bush, who will then blow it all to invade Afghanistan and Iraq, which is
of course what happened.
Totally what happened.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the dysfunction is very dispiriting, right? I mean, we might not, as American families, have to live within our means, but, we're not allowed to be that dysfunctional, or we end up out on the street. We'll be fired for sure. John, deportations have really, really heated up, and in a big way. And so let's start with this wild situation in Los Angeles.
Yes.
So yesterday there was a raid by ICE at what appears, I guess it's a piecework plant, like basically. These ICE showed up, they burst in, and they demanded papers from all the people who were working there. Anybody who could prove they were a U.S. citizen was allowed to leave. Everyone else was arrested. Things got spicy fast.
Yes.
It's by the way, one of the things I love about Los Angeles is that there is a no shits given kind of culture when it comes to confronting like fascist authoritarianism. And I mean, I'm not going to get into my whole LA Times thing, but it all boiled down initially to a jaywalking stop back in 2001. And like, as soon as I was arrested for jaywalking, handcuffed.
I was ticketed once for jaywalking.
Yeah, it's crazy how they do that. And I wasn't even jaywalking, which is the funny part because I'm a New Yorker. I jaywalk all the time. But I wasn't. It was just like, anyway, I'm handcuffed there, getting roughed up by this cop. And then all this crowd of people immediately gathered around. It was pre-cell phones. But they all gathered to witness. And I came to learn in Los Angeles, that's part of the culture. If they see cops, doing goon stuff, people stop what they're doing. They pull over their cars. They get out their phones. They start filming. It's, basically it goes way back. That's the Rodney King thing was part of that. Someone's like, out looking outside the window. So all that stuff. So there were also community activists who were, who had mobilized against this, including the head of the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, which is one of the most important and politically influential unions in the United States. He was arrested trying to basically fight ICE. The proprietor of the business locked ICE inside the business. He's like, oh, okay. Oh, you think you're taking those guys prisoners? I'll take you prisoner.
Oh my God.
So he locked the door. And then the FBI gets involved to come and free them. All hell broke loose. They're throwing flash grenades at the citizens of Los Angeles as they're rolling away in the streets, broad daylight in the Fashion District in downtown LA. Stones throw away from police headquarters and the old LA Times building. It's just really, this is what resistance looks like, right?
It really is. Yeah, this was on the front page of most papers today. It was on the front page of the LA Times, got pretty extensive coverage in the Washington Post and the New York Times. Riot is the correct word. This was a riot, and there were as many as 45 arrests because of the way people were attacking ICE. You mentioned jaywalking, Ted. This is the little dirty little trick that ICE has. If you have any arrest for anything in your past, anything, and an arrest can be a ticket that you paid, because you pay the ticket, that's an admission of guilt. They're using that as cause to deport people. And they're deporting a lot of people. Like most of the people whom they seize end up being deported. But speaking of deportations, there's been a loss for the Trump administration and a return of Kilmar Garcia. Yeah.
Kilmar's his first name, Abrego Garcia.
Yeah, he's the American citizen who was deported to El Salvador.
Green card holder.
That's right. He was a U.S. person, a green card holder, married to an American, has a child in the United States who's also an American. He was deported, and the Supreme Court said you have to bring him back. Was it the Supremes or was it the?
It was the Supremes.
It was Supremes. Yeah.
They said you have to facilitate his return.
That's right. Well, he finally returned, only to be charged with felony human trafficking and conspiracy.
Yeah.
What does that mean in this case, human trafficking?
So in this particular case, I read the charging papers. They're 10 pages long, and it seems almost like a stopgap, basically the government seemed like they were in a mad rush to find some way to hold him, right? So for basically months, they've been saying they can't get him back from El Salvador. It's impossible. It's up to El Salvador what to do, especially, he's under their custody. He's their citizen. We'll never see him again. And the Trump administration is saying there's no scenario in which he'd be returned. But obviously, secretly, they were behind the scenes feeling the heat from the federal courts. And it was a bad look in general. So they ginned up this move, right? We're moving him back to the United States, but we're keeping him in prison. We're going to charge him with this crime. So here's what he's charged with. They're claiming that he is a member of MS-13, has been, and if you read the charging papers, somewhere between, it's a vast range of years. It's like 13 years. Somewhere between this 13-year span, he did this thing. He faces one count of he was pulled over driving a car with I guess 9 other dudes, foreigners, and the cops came to ask these people where they were from. His explanation was, I'm driving them from a construction site, I think in St. Louis, back east. And but when the authorities looked into it, they claimed that license plate scanning software, which are deployed by police departments all over the United States, proved that he was nowhere near, that he was several states away, that they don't think that car was in St. Louis. And so they're suspecting that he was moving illegal immigrants from point A to point B, which is technically human trafficking or drug smuggling. He faces 5 years for each one. So he would, or even 10 years for each one. So he theoretically could go to prison for the rest of his life. Now, the thing is, John, you and I both know how to read these things. And, sometimes they've got you dead to rights and sometimes they don't. And I've got to say, there's enough reasonable doubt to, drive across state lines, through. There's just nothing. I mean, I'd say, gang member, there's no evidence presented whatsoever. I mean, I suppose that could come up at trial. And there's no, and in terms of our license plate readers say that you weren't in St. Louis. That doesn't mean you weren't in St. Louis. Yeah. It's like the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And so as Rumsfeld used to like to say, although he didn't make it up. So I don't know. I mean, I think how this is. When the federal government decides to come down on you, they're not going to make it right. They're never going to admit, we fucked up. We shouldn't have sent this guy. Our bad. We apologize. Go with God, back to your family, and maybe here's $100,000 for your trouble. They don't do that.
No way.
They double, triple, quadruple down. And that's what's going on here, as far as I can tell. I mean, it's a bad look, I think, for the government. Interestingly also, I don't know if the Trumpies think about this very much, but part of the narrative of the Trump return was, we've been conservatives, and me personally, the president, have been, basically the victims of a weaponized state that was used unfairly against us. I would argue that they were right. And then, but this is exactly the kind of behavior that people don't like. And sure, a lot of people don't want to see foreigners here. Nativism and xenophobia are rampant. But it just seems like cheating.
And who was it? It was Richard Nixon's agriculture secretary, and his name escapes me right now, but he said at the end of a long federal trial in which he won and was acquitted, he said, so now who do I see about getting my reputation back? And that's the situation that people who win in the federal courts find themselves in, because a trial probably cost you at least $1 million, maybe well north of $1 million. They've charge stacked. So you had to fight not just one felony count, but 10, 15, 20 felony counts. You've won. But so what? Because you're broke and ruined and you have to start all over again. I'm not looking forward to this. If I were Kilmar Garcia, I would not be looking forward to this at all.
No, I mean, however, unless the government has, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen here, John. You tell me if you think what you would think. I think what's going to happen is they're going to drag this out. They're going to keep him miserable. They'll keep him on ice, no pun intended. And at some point, a day before the trial, they're going to drop all the charges and let him walk because they don't have anything. And I think they're going to look stupid.
I think you're exactly right. Just like they did with Tom Drake. Our friend Tom Drake, He was charged with 9 felonies, 7 counts of espionage. NSA whistleblower. And literally the night before the trial began, they dropped all the charges. And what they did is they called Tom Drake's lawyers and said, we'll drop all the charges if he takes a plea to a misdemeanor so we can save face. So his lawyer, this is a terrible story, but his lawyer said to him, Tom, think of something you must have done that was illegal. And so Tom said, well, I once looked at Facebook on my lunch hour on a government computer. So he took a plea to misuse of a government computer for looking at Facebook. He was given an 18-month suspended sentence, and he had to do 40 hours of community service. But they dropped the 9 felonies that would have seen him die in a dank prison cell.
Would he? But I guess the thing is, they could have gotten a conviction, right? Because that was a political case, but they had the law on their side.
Yeah, they did. They had the law on their side.
I don't know with Kilmar Abrego Garcia if they have the law on their side.
I think you're right. I think they don't have the law on their side. They don't. You could drive a truck, as you just said, through the holes in the government's position so far.
And it's so vague. It's literally like, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, all the evidence appears to be 2 other detainees who are anonymous and not cited. Now, you know how juries feel about pigeons and squeals. Jurors don't trust them. They don't believe them. Yeah. They're like, this person will say anything to, get 3 meals instead of 2 meals a day in like the lockup. They'll say anything. So, it's completely just not trustworthy. Hey, if I were Kilmar,
yeah.
If I were his attorney, I mean, I'd be like, hey, let's roll the dice. Let's go to trial.
Go to trial. I agree.
Let's do it.
I would too. Yeah. He has nothing to lose.
Right.
Go to trial. I want to add too, there was a very, very unusual presidential appointment yesterday. And one of the men who received a presidential pardon in Donald Trump's first term, he was convicted of fraud, was yesterday named Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I think this is absolutely stunning. I think it's wonderful, first of all. Absolutely wonderful. Since this guy got out of prison, he has devoted his life to prison reform, sentencing reform, and Donald Trump named him Deputy Director of the Bureau of Prisons. Now, the directorship of the Bureau of Prisons is vacant right now because one of the first things that Trump did in this term, literally the first week he was president, was to fire the director of the Bureau of Prisons. And so, yeah, Joshua Smith. I think this is an absolutely wonderful development. I am disappointed that he didn't call me first because I would have said yes to this job and I would have slashed and burned everything to the ground. But I trust this guy to do it. Pretty incredible.
I mean, of course, the silent part is that the federal system is the least bad.
That is true. The federal system is the least bad. It's the least broken, which says a lot because it's impossibly, irretrievably broken. But you're right. Just look at Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, New Mexico, California in many respects. Those systems are broken, maybe beyond repair in some of those states.
Here in New York City,
New York City, Rikers. It's notorious.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I would view it as something of a death sentence to be sent to Rikers.
I would agree.
There's so much major prison reform that needs to happen. I mean, let's start with you're entitled to medical and dental care as a human being. You're a ward of the state if you're in prison. They owe you that. You told this story about like when you had a cavity, right? I mean, that blew me away.
I had a cavity. Or no, it wasn't a cavity. My crown broke.
Oh, okay.
And I went to the dentist, who's there like 1 day a week. And I said, I have a crown, I think broke. And so he looked, he said, oh yeah, it broke. And then he said, listen, just between us, I'll patch it up, but you're not going to be here long. So when you go home, just go get a new crown. But my job here is just to pull teeth. None of these guys get real dental care. He said, I just wait until the tooth is rotten and I just pull it out. And you don't want to do that. But he was right. It was a momentary, period of honesty. And he admitted that was his job. Now, this is a dentist who was so bad, he couldn't really be a dentist on the outside and make a living. Just like most prison doctors can't make it on the outside. We had a doctor when I first arrived in prison. We had a doctor who resigned because the warden told him, you got to stop prescribing medication to all these prisoners. And he said, I only prescribe medication when they need medication. The warden said, yeah, but it costs us a fortune. You have to stop giving prescriptions. And the doctor resigned rather than be told who can and can't get medication.
It's a violation of his Hippocratic Oath.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. So we went about 6 months with no doctor at all. So you were shit out of luck if you really needed to see a doctor. We finally got a doctor. He was a pediatrician who had lost his medical license because he was accused of molesting a child at the Cleveland Clinic.
Oof, awesome.
And that's who the prison doctor was.
Yeah, they just don't. I mean, they don't care. When I tell people like, oh, you're thinking of protesting or whatever, be careful. Like if you, like I use a rescue inhaler, you don't get to bring that with you.
No, sir, you do not.
You're completely on your own, right? Mm-hmm. If you are on, SSRIs and you need those to get by and maintain, your mental stability, you don't get to bring those with you.
Nope.
Basically you go cold turkey when you go in there.
And you see a lot of guys who are in the midst of a cold turkey withdrawal. My bunkmate, this was something I learned early on. I had a bunkmate, a really nice young kid who was in on a parole violation or probation violation because he had a dirty urine. So sweet kid. He was about 23 years old. It was his third stint in prison. And every single time he's in prison, it's on a federal heroin charge. So the kid needed to be in rehab, not in prison.
Sure.
And he was a really sweet kid.
He needs a methadone clinic.
He needs a methadone clinic, which they didn't have in Braddock, Pennsylvania, home of John Fetterman. So he first came in, and when you have a new cellmate come in, everybody sort of, you're nice. You give him a toothbrush and some toothpaste and a bar of soap and some shampoo and whatever, just to get him started. Everybody did that with me too. It was very generous. And he said, guys, I'm going to apologize right now. I last had a hit yesterday morning. I'm already withdrawing, and it's going to be bad in a couple days, and it's going to be very bad for a week. And I had never experienced anything like this before, but as he got deeper into withdrawal, it was violent chills and shaking and vomiting, and he would moan in bed and then start crying. His sheets were soaked with sweat, but everybody took turns helping him get through it because the guards didn't give a shit if he lived or died from this withdrawal. And then by the end of the week, he was actually okay, and he was okay the rest of the time that I was there. But this is what they do. They don't want to spend money on you. I complain about in writing. I complain about private prisons all the time, and the reason why I'm so opposed to the existence of private prisons is that they're there solely to make a profit, and they make a profit by feeding you animal grade food instead of human grade food, and cutting back on your medical care. That's how they make a profit. We're not the only country. There are a handful of other countries that have private prisons, but this is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I have very little hope that, in America, you have to be a sympathetic victim to get help.
Yeah, you do.
And nobody cares about prisoners. They think, they knew what they were doing. I keep saying, your punishment is losing your liberty. That's the punishment. That's not right. Brutal, like conditions being eaten alive by bed bugs like that guy in Georgia.
Literally, the bed bugs ate him to death.
Yeah, he went into shock from the thousands of bites because the prison was so disgusting. I think that was Fulton County, Georgia. Yes. So it's foul, and it's like, and these people are mostly going to come back into our society and traumatized, less able to work, less able to readjust, more likely, certainly to have contempt for the system.
Without a doubt.
I mean, I would. I have contempt for the system, and I haven't even spent time in prison.
Yeah.
So, John, let's talk about people who spent some time in prison, a little bit of time. The January 6th people.
Yes.
Six of the, I think it's five of the Proud Boys, including Enrique. Tario. He's the boss of the Proud Boys. They all the January 6ers got pardoned by Trump when he came into office. Almost right away. There were 1,500 or so of them. And all of the Capitol rioters are out. I guess obviously there's the one who was shot to death. And
Indiana,
the lady.
I think. Right.
And so now they're suing for wrongful arrest, wrongful imprisonment, and demanding financial compensation. I mean, I assume you have some insight here, John. The pardon. So, I mean, there's a bunch of questions I have for you. First of all, is it part of the conditions of accepting a pardon that you agree that it stops here and that you don't sue?
No.
Okay.
They
can sue.
They can sue. The only thing about a pardon is that to accept the pardon, you have to admit that you were guilty of the crime for which you were charged.
Mm-hmm. So I guess they would claim that they accepted the pardon under duress.
Under duress.
They were, so that's still going to create a substantial legal bar. But generally speaking, suing the federal government or any government entity
almost impossible.
That's it.
Almost impossible.
And the reason, and what people don't understand is, that's because you can't fight City Hall. It's because the system is so powerful. That's all true, but that's not why. The reason is because the laws have been written.
Yeah, they indemnify themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do it. I mean, otherwise, we could all think of half a dozen reasons for each and every one of us to sue the government.
True. True. So qualified immunity, right? That's
qualified immunity.
If you're working for the state, you can pretty much do whatever you want. And the state, even if you're a former employee, even if it turns out that you left in disgrace, that you abused your office, it doesn't matter. John, what do you think of the January 6ers? I mean, I have my feeling generally, I have absolutely nothing in common with their politics. I think the whole thing was, a disgrace, and it's just international embarrassment. But I think that the way the Biden administration handled them was so over the top that it erases and eclipses everything that they did wrong. They treated them like they were like 9/11 terrorists.
They did, and even compared them to 9/11 terrorists.
Right.
Yeah. I agree, Ted. This was over the top. Listen, that was a riot. Mm-hmm. And they were guilty of several crimes, including things like vandalism, for example. But 25 and 30-year sentences? Come on.
It's ridiculous. It's insane. And it's like, well, people are like, to charge them under the Sedition Act. These were people who were trying to overthrow the government. Well, the way I look at it is, okay, let's just say for the sake of argument that they had successfully taken over the Capitol, stopped the certification of the electoral vote, and declared Donald Trump the winner. That doesn't make Donald Trump the president. It's like it's purely ceremonial. It's like it's just a ceremony. Who cares? You've disrupted, basically a little pomp and circumstance. You shouldn't have done it. I mean, I think, I do think this kind of, this kind of crap for like the high level people, it called for like a couple of weeks in the DC lockup to just like give, just to give you something to think about. That's no fun, by the way. Not something anyone would want to do.
No, it is not. That's right.
But basically, and then Enrique Torres, I don't understand. He wasn't even there.
No, he wasn't there. No.
At all.
And his crime was, twofold. He set fire to a Black Lives Matter flag.
Right.
And he encouraged the J6 people to go into Washington.
Mm-hmm.
30 years in prison. And
it's insane.
I trashed him on the show, not for either one of those things, but because over the course of his trial, it came out that he was a longtime FBI rat.
Mm-hmm.
And he had ratted out all of his compatriots. That's where I came down on Enrique Tarrio. He was actually on the show that I did with Lee Stranahan. He's a friend of Lee Stranahan's.
Oh, wow.
And I was very harsh. And I said on the show afterwards that he's going to have to sit with the pedophiles at the pedophile and rat table. He can't sit with the other, regular prisoners because it's public. He was a rat for years.
Since he was a rat, I mean, I know this is the most naive of all questions, John. Why didn't the government look out for him or turn a blind eye or give him a light sentence?
That is a very good question. And in any normal circumstance, they would have. The FBI would have said to the criminal division at DOJ, look, this is our guy. Let's work out a deal very quietly. He's going to take a guilty plea. He'll do 6 months in the DC jail, and then he'll just go home. They came down on him like a ton of bricks.
They did. I mean, it makes you wonder, why anyone would ever agree to work with the federal government as an informant going forward. Or, I think of the same thing, with the, we should talk about the travel ban. Trump instituted this travel ban last week for about a dozen countries, some of them seemingly randomly selected. I never knew that Laos represented a grave and present danger. I
was going to ask Manila about that.
Manila, I've been giving her a very hard time about that, of all the terror plots coming out of Laos these days. But I was thinking about the Afghans who became the latest locals to serve as support staff for U.S. occupation forces. And I'm like, okay, so another word for that would be traitors, collaborators, Vichy people, from the standpoint of the locals or from the Taliban government or whatever. And we don't look out for them, right? It's why would anyone going forward ever work for the, be an informant for the feds or overseas work for the U.S. government, knowing how we treat them? But the Laotians, by the way, we can talk about the Laotians too. We did the same thing to them during the secret wars.
Yeah, and they're only the most peaceful people in the world, And then we just crack on them just like we crack on everybody else. There was another thing too. I'm looking for it, and I just found it. Our friend Peter Kuznick sent me a press conference transcript from the ACLU today. The Department of Defense has banned more than 500 books from its military schools. When I was serving in Bahrain, everybody's kid went to the DOD school, the Department of Defense, DODDS, Department of Defense. I forget what it stands for, DODS. But anyway, there are 13 books that are especially head shakers, that are no longer permitted to appear in any school owned or run by the Department of Defense. Things like Freckle-Faced Strawberry by Julianne Moore. It's about it's a children's book. Mm-hmm. It's about this little girl who has red hair and lots of freckles, and her friends call her Freckle-Faced Strawberry. My kids had this book. That's it. There's no hidden message in it or anything.
Okay. The strawberry isn't some sort of coded trans lesbian.
No, it's about being different because nobody else in her class had freckles. Mm-hmm. So it's banned. How about To Kill a Mockingbird, which every one of us has read by Harper Lee, right?
Classic.
Famous. Classic. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Mm. Okay.
Well, that I could see why
all right, maybe.
This administration might not take kindly to that.
The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Famous. Here's one that I read in prison. The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. That was a major book in 2013, 2014. Mm-hmm. The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini.
That's crazy.
How could that possibly be objectionable?
There's literally nothing in that that's anti-American in any way, shape, or form, no matter how you spin it.
No, not at all. Here's one, very controversial. The power of style. How fashion and beauty are being used to reclaim culture.
Well, here on the show, we're classic examples of that.
Any book by Greta Thunberg. Okay.
Of course.
She's horrible anyway.
How dare you?
Yeah, dare you? Like, don't shout at me, little girl. And the last one, of course, is The Untold History of the United States by Peter Kuznick and Oliver Stone.
Which is also, by the way, really good.
Really, really good.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
So, John, doesn't it? So this seems like it all dovetails with the current edict in front of Secretary Hegseth, where they're looking at stripping away the names of sort of woke type figures. I use that completely scare quote. From like various Navy vessels, right? So there's U.S. ships named after Harvey Milk, who was assassinated by a San Francisco cop, basically for being gay and liberal in San Francisco. There's Harriet Tubman.
I know, right?
I mean, what did she do wrong?
How could you possibly object to Harriet Tubman?
Yeah. I wouldn't say, besides just being a black heroine, it's not like she, I don't know how she got politicized.
And it's probably for the same reason that she's not yet on the $20 bill, which was supposed to happen 15 years ago.
That's true. Although there is a move afoot. I don't know if you know about this, John. There is a bill pending in Congress by some MAGA conservative that would create a new $250 bill that would put Trump on it. Oh my God. Now, I don't know if it's practice or law, but I'm pretty sure it's practice that living people don't go on U.S. currency.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at least practice.
Right.
Otherwise, you're more like Turkmenbashi, Turkmenistan.
That's right.
Where you put yourself on while you're still alive.
And only white cars. Nothing but white cars.
Well, at least in Turkmenistan, that makes sense because it's so hot. So hot.
Reminds me of something that's attributed probably, how do I say this as an adjective? Apocryphally to Henry Ford, that
the
Model T, you can have it in any color you want so long as it's black.
Yeah. Supposedly asked at a press conference.
Yes.
Like, Mr.
And it was because back then, for whatever reason, black paint dried more quickly than any other paint, and he got such a deal on it in mass quantities that every car was black. Right,
because now the cheap car is the white car. Right, it's like if you save a few $1,000 if you get your car white. It always bugged me when New York City bought their new police cruisers 20 years ago or so, and they used to be the classic black and white, or then the blue and white, the iconic light blue with the white stripe along the side with the precinct name. Really cool looking car.
That is cool.
And the Caprice Classics. Those cars were replaced, and just to save a few bucks, they're like, white cars with this crappy, and this drives me crazy. It says NYPD police. Police department stands for police. So it's like saying ATM machine, right? Automatic teller machine. It's like, it's so dumb. And so it's idiocracy. But yeah, my son was telling me, I guess this is true. He like me, he collects these kinds of stories, that barns are red in the United States because at one point, all the paint that was available, that was the cheapest paint, was red. And like, so for some reason, there was just like a huge surplus. And it became, now it's just sort of like, well, barns are red. But barns don't have to be red. It's just,
Jeez, oh man, I didn't know that.
A random thing that happened.
Oh my goodness. No, I didn't know that.
I love stuff like that. So travel, so this is all tied in together. I mean, I'm sorry, I view these things, these developments, the book bans, getting rid of Harriet Tubman from her battleship or whatever it is. These are all racist and sexist dog whistles, right? That's all they are?
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's what this is about. Sure. Hey, speaking of Hegseth too, I haven't heard any further rumors of Hegseth going, it appears he's weathered this signal scandal.
Yes.
But I have heard that internally there's a lot of dissension in his inner circle, and there are going to be more resignations coming up soon. But this is Hegseth consolidating power. It's not Hegseth losing his grip on power. So I think he's surviving it.
Yeah, I mean, there's that sort of intangible will he or will he not kind of arc that we see in these kind of crises. And just when they stop talking about you, the Elon Musk thing probably gave him a lot of cover. No one's paying attention to Hegseth.
Oh my
Everyone's
God,
forgotten all about it. But, we talked a little bit about racism. So let's go over to Israel's policies in Gaza.
Yeah.
It seems to tie. So Israel and the United States basically collaborated to form something called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is basically a new aid distribution scheme after 60 days of total cutoff of basically aid had been reduced to a trickle. Then 60 days ago or so, more than that now, the Israelis cut off everything going in. Reports of mass famine and starvation were getting even worse than before, to the point where the alarms were sounding in European capitals. And now so the U.S. and Israel announced, okay, we're going to have these aid distribution points under this new scheme, but basically they're protected by armed mercenaries, like I guess Blackwater type mercenaries from the U.S. And it's very shady. It's not transparent. One day after another, people show up to get food, and then there's gunfire in an effort to control the crowds, and 20 or more people get killed every day. And finally, the Israelis, people keep coming because they're so desperately hungry. Mm-hmm. But at some point now, the Israelis are like, okay, they're coming to Jesus. Probably not the right choice of metaphor, but they've decided, okay, all right, this is not working, and they've decided to put that on hold, probably permanently. But they're not announcing that they're going to open the border and allow these thousands of trucks that are piled up waiting to come in to deliver food and medical and other vital supplies to the people of Gaza. Meanwhile, the president of France is signaling that he's very close to declaring Palestine as a recognized state by France. And it should be pointed out that Pope Francis, one of the things we don't talk about, who died recently, under his watch, the Vatican recognized Palestine. So we have Ireland and the Vatican. If France goes next,
that's big.
Lots of other countries will go.
Yeah, that's big. I agree. The Americans, the British, and the Germans likely won't. But there are a lot of European Union countries that are waiting for the floodgates to open.
Belgium,
yes,
Spain,
the Netherlands,
Portugal, Italy.
That's
Greece.
right. That's right.
More. I'm sure there's more. Some of the Balkans will go. Yeah, no, I mean it's really, really bleak. I mean, oddly, the fact that it's so unavoidably bleak gives hope for the political hopes of the people of Gaza, but their misery is not to be, downplayed at all.
Agreed.
How do you think this plays out?
I don't think the Israelis are going to do anything to stop this. I think the Israelis, they're weighing, do we lose diplomatic points on the one hand, or do we continue to slaughter as many Palestinians as we can on the other? And I think that they're going to go in favor of the slaughter. And again, I'm going to repeat what I said a week ago. As soon as the Israelis conclude that they have Gaza well in hand, they're going to turn their attention to the West Bank. This thing is not going to end soon. It's just not. And there are Jewish settlers chomping at the bit to take Palestinian land in the West Bank.
Eric's asking if EU member recognition has any legal consequences in Western courts. It's a great question.
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That's something that we ought to investigate.
Yeah. I mean, because at that point, a stateless Palestinian is in a completely different place.
Oh my God. Can you imagine that not only have you just lost everything, half your family has been wiped out, but you don't even have a passport that would allow you to leave if you wanted to leave.
Yeah.
And thank you, firmware. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Thank you for the tip hitting the tip jar.
And that's an important point too. Even Piers Morgan, who's one of the most pro-Zionist people out there in the media, has indeed begun criticizing the Zionist movement. That says a lot. You
know, it's funny. I was sometimes I go down the rabbit hole, John, of like the comment sections in the Times and the Post, particularly about Gaza. Yesterday, I was reading the latest from Gaza, and there, and it struck me the illogic of a lot of the Zionist arguments, that are based on hysteria, and because they're such loud arguments, we tend to just sort of not respond or engage with them. But I think we should. For example, one of the ones I kept, people who are criticizing Israel, they want to abolish the state of Israel. Okay, some people do. And that means they're favoring ethnic cleansing and the death of Jews. And I'm like, before the Soviet Union collapsed, many people in America wanted the USSR to go away and then celebrated when it did. And okay, I'm going to set aside the fact that, a famine ensued in Russia and that, partly because of the way that we handled that. But the point is, the USSR as a nation state, the biggest nation state in the world, went away, but the people, the animals, the dogs, the cats, the trees, the skies, the mountains, the lakes, they remain. And like if the state of Israel goes away, all the desert and the cities and the people, just like they were there before 1948, they will be there after, that goes away. It's amazing to me. And then it's like, it's also kind of predicated on this fiction that Jews need Israel to live safely. There's no place in the world where a Jew is likelier to be killed than in Israel. It's the most dangerous place in the world to be Jewish. 50% of the world's Jews live in other countries, and they're all doing better than Israelis.
That's a great point. Yes.
It's like, I think if we brought Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, back from the grave, he'd say, "What the fuck is wrong with you people?"
I think you're right.
Well, and he had urged, historically that he was against like the expropriation of land. He was like, we should go in there, we should buy everything legally, we should live. That's what we have to live side by side with the locals.
That's right. They started doing that by buying land from a wealthy Egyptian family that owned what is today Gaza and the coast up to Tel Aviv. It was all about buying the land,
right?
And
also working to get along like with the locals. Don't exclude them, hire them, go into business with them.
That's right.
And then like after he died, his influence went away, and then the more militant, it's like the British influence, right? That like they were like the colonial influence. You guys just take it all. That's what we do. You don't have to
take it.
Just take it. And that worked out great. Temporarily, but not in the long run, I think.
No. Agreed.
John, before we go, I'd like to end on a hopeful note. HIV, you and I are old enough to remember the AIDS crisis. I went to so many funerals of friends that I lost count. And it was a horrible tragedy. HIV is now really largely under control in the United States due to treatments like PrEP. People can live natural, full, great lives, and they can have partners who are uninfected, who never get infected because they don't have the viral load. It's a miracle. But even better than that is like a cure that could be used to cure HIV. So you wouldn't need to do this treatment. And more importantly for Africa, where there's a major crisis that's killing many, many people. Well, so mRNA, which is the 25-year-old technology that was used to develop the COVID vaccines, it seems now pretty clear that it can be used effectively to create a cure for HIV. What it does is it basically, the mRNA coaxes the challenge for virologists has been that the HIV hides in one particular cell and needs to be coaxed out so it can be contained or killed. Now the mRNA knows how to do that. So this is probably the first of a lot of, effectively, it's kind of like gene splicing. It's like CRISPR. mRNA is gonna cure a lot of diseases, I think.
Incredible. I hope so. I hope this is right. I have a close family member who was infected 30 years ago, and by her husband, unknowingly, and after all these years, for the very first time, she feels that she doesn't have to worry. Because of things like PrEP and because of the drug cocktails that are available. If mRNA can be programmed to actually kill HIV, this is going to save millions and millions of lives. Yeah. That
will be awesome. Of course, it is true what firmware says.
Yes, it is. That is true.
That is true. And,
that is true.
Don't get me started on Dr. Fauci, who is more of a business person than a doctor, really.
That's why he's rich. Yep.
That he shouldn't be. And so one last question. Matt's asking, how do you think Russia will respond to the recent attacks on nuclear bases on their own soil by Ukraine?
Well, I think we saw the beginning of that answer over the weekend. Or no, today's Saturday, so it was like Thursday, not over the weekend, where the Russians bombed Kiev and hit as many Ukrainian bases as far west as possible. This was an incredible operation on the part of the Ukrainians, just bold and went all the way literally to Vladivostok. We make a big deal all the time about Russia being so vast that it spans 11 time zones. Well, this was in the 11th time zone. Yeah, it doesn't go any farther east than Vladivostok.
Right. And then you get to Sarah Palin's house after that.
Yeah, exactly. You end up in her backyard. So the Russians have to respond. This was an embarrassment to the Russians, maybe even a humiliation. So I think we're going to see more bombing of Kyiv and of Ukrainian bases all across Ukraine, not just in the disputed areas and Crimea. I think it really upgraded the level of conflict.
Okay, I agree with that. So we'll keep an eye out on all the news. We are here Wednesday at 5 p.m., Saturday at 12 noon. That's Eastern time. I'm Ted Rall, John Kiriakou. You've been deprogrammed. Please support the show. Thank you again for the kind donations for those of you who have done that. Please support the show by following it and retweeting it and all that stuff. Good stuff. Thank you so much. See you online. Take care.
Great weekend.